Welcome back to Redesigned Rose. My name is Jen Rose. I am so excited to have you here to be able to learn how to do this waffle stitch. It is such an easy pattern to learn, my friends. And if you are somebody who has seen my videos before, you do know that I like to break down each and every one of the steps and explain why. It does help, I think, and from what I've heard from you guys, that it helps to retain the information, make it easier to understand, easier to do, and that is the goal here. This is a hand towel that I did make. This stitch can be good for anything. It can be good for washcloths. It could be good for a scarf, a blanket, of course, dish towel, hand towel. This one is going to go in my guest bathroom. I actually think this would make a beautiful table runner, to be honest. I think that would be just really pretty, maybe with some fringe on either end, but that's where the creativity is up to you, my friends. I'm going to show you how to do the stitch and how you apply it to whatever project you want to work on. I would be excited if you would share that with me. As always, I do ask that you like, subscribe, share this content if you do like it. I do appreciate your support in that way. To talk a little bit about this project, again, this one is a hand towel for my guest bathroom. The waffle stitch is only seen on one side of the project. The back of the project is beautiful, but it does not have the same waffle pattern. So you will only see it on the one side. However, it is reversible to the back as well, because I think this is super intricate and pretty as well. As far as the materials, I did use this Coboo yarn for the first time, and I have to say it was a little bit tricky to work with, only because it does have these multiple strands, and every now and then my hook would get caught on some of these, but the payoff was so worth it because this is a 51% cotton, which I needed for the absorbency in the towel, and it is a 49% bamboo, which I believe is how they're getting to that name. And that is giving this such a soft and almost silky feel, as well as a little bit of stretch. This yarn is Coboo Yarn. It is made by Lion Brand. It is in the color beige. It does call for a 4mm hook. However, I did go up to a 4.5mm hook just to give it a little more drape, and wanted to make sure that this towel wasn't going to be too stiff. I did want it to just be able to flow and fall, especially because I do have it hung up on a towel hook. Once again, 51% cotton, 49% rayon from bamboo. And it is machine washable and dryable, always a plus in my house. And it is a number 3 weight yarn. So if you don't use this particular yarn, it's okay. Any size 3 for this type of a project would work. But quite honestly, any size yarn and matching hook, again, I go up about half a size on each one of the recommendations for this one, just to give it more drape. You can play with those sizes of yarn and hooks for the project that you're working on. I have even done a blanket where I have taken the yarn and doubled it up in that waffle stitch. Just added so much more dimension and texture, if you could possibly imagine, by doubling up the strands. So again, the possibilities are endless. So as far as supplies, once again, we have our yarn, we have our scissors, we have our 4.5mm hook, and as always, we do have our hands. Let's get started. For the hand towel, I did work on a chain of 70 in total. This pattern is worked in multiples of 3 plus 1. So my 69 chains was divisible by 3 plus 1 more for a total of 70. I know it's too early for math. However, whatever size project you are going to work on, just remember multiples of 3 and then add 1 more. For this swatch that I'm going to do with you guys, I'm going to work up a total of 19. right, so there is our little tiny chain of 19. Now I will, for the first row, and this is going to be, again, for the border at the end. This was the original chain, and then the first row that we're going to do is just going to be a single crochet. And this is going to create, as you can see on the border itself, I don't want to confuse you guys, but there's not a bottom ridge to this particular waffle, and it's just going to be because of the border that we're putting on. Once we get to this row here, which is technically the first row of our waffle, and this will be the second row, these two rows right here are the entire repeat pattern. But for now, we're worked on our chain. We're gonna do our first row of single crochets. What we're gonna do is we're gonna go into the back hump on the back leg of the chain, and we're gonna work in the second bump from the hook. So this would be the first one here, and we're gonna go into that second one. And again, just a row of single crochets. Now, one of the things that I do just to make it a little easier to get into that back hump, because sometimes it can be tricky, is I'll just grab it here with my fingernail and guide my hook through or thread it over my hook, just to make it a little bit easier, because this part can be a little tricky. So if you are struggling with that a little bit, you're doing it right. Sometimes I'm able to just guide it through like this. Other times I actually have to grab it. So I'll go ahead and work my single crochets into each one of these all the way down to the end of my row. And whether you are working on a swatch of 19 with me, or you're doing the full chain of 70 for the hand towel, or whatever number you're working on, feel free to put me on pause. And I am so happy to meet you at the end of our rows together. Just want to make sure this little guy is so easy to miss because this last chain is part of the slip knot. It is easy to miss it, but it does count, so we never want to forget that one as well. Just make sure you get that single crochet into that. So there is our very first row of little teeny tiny single crochets. For the next row, we're going to go ahead and chain one and turn our work. And again, as part of the border, this next row will be a row of just double crochets all the way across the top here. Again, not part of the waffle pattern yet. That will be the very next row. This is still part of our border, and once again, just a double crochet into the top of each and every stitch. And I know this little swatch looks a little flimsy as I'm working with it, because it is so tiny and I don't have so much to grab onto. It's easy for this to flip around and all of that. But as you work up your rows and you have something a little more substantial to hold on to, it does get easier, my friend. And as you are working up these double crochets, if you do see the top of your row, which has this little V shape here, sometimes it's a little slanted, but that is the actual top. And you want to make sure you are going through, and I'll go through the right one here. Do you want to make sure you're going through the front and back so that you do have that entire V on your hook. And that is just for a regular double crochet. And I don't want to confuse you, but there are patterns where you will just go through the front loop or the back loop of each one of those V stitches to create different patterns, but we're not doing that today. So we are down to the last 1, 2, 3 double crochets that we'll be doing for our row 2. And when we're done with that, we will be turning our work and getting started on the waffle pattern. So excited. And here's that last stitch. That does include our turning chain that we did. All right. So here is just the beginning of our border. Now we're not going to chain anything. We're going to go ahead and get started right into the next row. So the very first stitch, which is the side border, we're going to do a stacked single crochet. And this will be at the beginning of every row after you turn your work. And the way we do that, we just go right into that very first stitch from the hook, and you're going to work a single crochet. Then we're going to go into the left side here of that single crochet, and we're going to work another single crochet. And that is how you do a stacked double crochet. And what that's going to do, instead of chaining twice, it's going to help create a nice cute little border on the side of our waffle, as well as it's going to bring the height of this stitch to the height of our next row. It just keeps everything nice and square. All right, into the waffle pattern we go. So we're going to create our very first ridge. Now each one of these stitches that we've done have created a post, each one of these double crochets. There is a post, and we're going to do what's called a front post double crochet. And a front post is when we have the post itself on the front of our crochet hook. Now, not to confuse you, but just so you know, there is a back post stitch where you can do where the post is on the back of your hook. This entire pattern with the waffles, it's only front stitch, and it's a front stitch double crochet. It's harder to say than it is to do, I promise. So you'll yarn over just as you're going to do a double crochet. The only difference is, instead of going into the top, we're going to go through the post and have it in front, and then you're just going to pull your yarn through just as you would and complete your double crochet stitch. And what that does is, again, just pops up the edge ridge of our first square. Now for the next 2 stitches that we're going to do, we're just going to do a regular double crochet into the top of each one. Now the only thing you want to be careful of is making sure you don't go into this one. This top stitch is counted in the row of your popped up ridge. So you don't want to go into this one. You want to definitely go into the next stitch at the top. And that's how that looks from the top view. And so again, we're just going to work up 2 top double crochets. And this is basically the valley, if you will, of the waffle. And then the next one, we're going to do a front post. And so you just work your hook in there, pull your yarn through, and complete your double crochet stitch. And as you can see, what that's creating is those ridges to outline our square. And again, we won't have that bottom ridge just because of our border. All right, so we just did a front post. Now we'll go and do 2 top double crochets to create the valley of the next one. And then the next stitch, we're going to do that front post. And then it just repeats. So it's front post, 2 top, front post, 2 top, all the way to the end of your row. Nice and simple. There's my 2 top. So my next one, I'm gonna go ahead and do that front post. And again, just completing the stitch just as I would in a regular double crochet. And then 2 on the top. And a front post. Two on the top. And then a front post. And then in our very last stitch, we're going to do a top double crochet. And that is so that we have that border. So we have a border on this side of the ridge and a border on this side of this ridge. And these will get more pronounced as we continue to work up our rows. We're going to turn our work, and what we're going to end up doing is the opposite of what we did here. The first stitch, we're going to do a double crochet so we can keep our border going. This was a front post, so on this row, we're going to do a top post. These two were a top post, so we're going to do front post for those two. Again, top post, or this was a front post, so we'll do a top post, just the opposite. So this side, you had your border here, your front post double crochet, your 2 top, your front, 2 top, front, etc. This next row, we're going to do our border, top, top double crochet, front post, top, front, top, etc. I know it sounds confusing, but I promise it gets super easy, especially after you repeat it so many times. So for the first stitch here, we're going to go right into that very first stitch and do our stacked double crochet. And we do that by doing 1 single crochet and go into this left side of that stitch and do another single crochet. And that will continue our border, as you can see, just like that. So for the next stitch, we're going to do a top double crochet, just the opposite of what we did on the other side. And the next 2 are going to be front post. And this is where it's creating that different pattern on the back. And then we end this part here with a top double crochet, and I'll show you what that's looking like on either side. So right here, it is, you can almost see the letter H. All right, as we build up our rows, when we come back down our next row here, it will complete the rest of this square. So let's continue that pattern all the way down to the end of this row. So I've just done a top, so now I'm going to do 2 front. There's 1. And 2. And then I will do a top stitch here. And then 2 front. I'm trying to go a little slow here so that you guys can see exactly what I'm doing here. And then a top. And another way to make sure that you didn't accidentally go into the wrong stitch is to flip this over and just make sure that your ridges are lining up with each other and your valleys are lining up with each other. I like to check mine every so often just in case I'm getting distracted or the kids are asking me a million questions and I get caught off guard or lose my focus somewhere. And that way, if I am off on a stitch, I only have to take out a little bit of work instead of a lot of work to correct the mistake. All right, so for this row, when we get to the end, we do have that front post, so we'll do a top double crochet, and then we're gonna do one more in the final stitch to continue this border on this side. So you actually end with 2 top double crochets. But we can do it. There we are. All right, and turn our work. This is where I think you can really start to see the fun in the pattern. But by the time we complete this next row, I think a lot of this is really gonna come together. So we turned our work. Once again, we don't chain, but we do a stacked double crochet right into that very first stitch. So there is our single crochet, and then we're gonna do another one just into the left side of that stitch. And that'll bring up our height. Now what we're gonna do is just repeat the last 2 rows that we did. So post, top, top, post, top, top, post, all the way down. And this one is very, very easy. This is where it also gets a lot easier to identify because you're just going to copy what you did in the previous row each time you turn. So there is our front post. And then for the next 2 stitches here, so again, I want to make sure, just to show you, I want to make sure my ridges are lining up, and then I want to make sure that I just go, let me point with my hook here, it's a little easier because it's so tiny, but this front post goes with this stitch right behind it. So these 2 will be my next 2 top double crochets, and then this one will be my next post. I hope that makes sense. When I was first learning the stitch, I found out I was going into the top of the stitch that this post was covering, and it would make me continually get off on my pattern. So I just wanted to point that out to you because I don't want you to have to make the same mistake I did. So 2 top, a front post, and I'll just continue to do this all the way down my row. And again, just copying the same stitch that I see right below. And then we will have our front post and our top double crochet. And as you can see, it's kind of gets tucked behind sometimes. So you want to make sure you make that little shy stitch, get over the stage fright, and come on out and play here. All right. So you can see here we do have the 2 rows, and all of our ridges are lining up just the way that they should. And we do have the border on the side of the ridge on each side of the project. We have our border down here. Let's do one more row of complete waffles. Then I will walk you through all of the information that I did for the towel project, how much yarn I used, the number of rows, all that good stuff. Please feel free to rewind, save the video, stop, rewind as many times as you need to. It does help. And then turn our work. So when we are on the back side of the work, we're building up the first half of the square. And then when we come back down, we'll be building the top of that waffle stitch. All right, once again, into the end here, stacked double crochet. So we do our single crochet and another one into the left side of that stitch. So once again, I'm at the end here, and I want to make sure I get this little shy guy out here so I can be sure to get my last stitch in there. And I can continue my border. And that way everything does remain nice and square. So I know that this is a much smaller swatch, but once you've worked up your number of rows and of course the length that you stitched up, what you're gonna do is just repeat the border but backwards. So we started with single crochet and then went to double crochet. So in this case, we're gonna end up doing double crochet and end with single crochet. And that way the border will just mirror itself on the top and bottom. And that is your entire pattern, my friends. I would love to see any projects that you are working on. I would love to see your swatches, or if you've taken this waffle stitch and created something beautiful and unique with it, even a different, if it's not a hand towel or a blanket or a scarf, or even these make great headbands too. I did forget to mention that in the beginning. This is a great stitch for a headband, and this is a great yarn for it, once again, because of the stretch and as well as the soft feel. Does feel good against the skin. So just an idea there. Again, I do appreciate your support. I do appreciate your time. I hope that my time that I gave here was something valuable that you guys can learn, even if it's not to create this exact project. Maybe it does spark some creativity in something that you do want to create. And again, I would love your feedback. I'd love to hear from you guys. It does absolutely brighten my day. So until next time, my friends, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you again next time.